So when you mentioned that we millennials are email lovers, you are absolutely right. Actually, I adore email. The fact is that I love writing emails. I actually am a long email writer. But here's the thing: I mean it's not a Gen Z or my or millennial thing. People do not like long emails. Like that's like a big no.
Personality.
I like
People
writing
don't like
them,
them.
but
Yeah,
I don't like reading them. It
there
is
you
Absolutely,
true.
go.
me neither.
There you go.
Maybe like I think that these are very informal, are very casual because of the use of emojis and that type of stuff. However, you don't feel like a working machine all the time. You feel like a human being interacting with other human beings working
Mhm.
in a same project. That's what I believe.
Right.
Okay.
Welcome to the Hired Hub podcast, your ultimate guide to mastering the complexities of remote work and pushing your career forward.
Whether you're tuning in from the busy streets of Latin America or any corner of the globe, we're here to give you tools and insights to succeed in today's dynamic job market. I'm your host, Gaby Morales.
And I am your co host, Jess Torres. If you're a recent graduate eager to leave your mark or a seasoned pro looking to redirect your career, you can join us as we explore the endless possibilities of remote work and career growth.
Get ready to unlock your full potential with the Hired Hub podcast. Okay, Jess, you and I are in between that Millennials and Gen Z fine line. We were born 1995, 1996, and I feel like we have a little bit of both worlds. I'm very Gen Z when it comes to some things and very millennial when it comes to others. So, especially when it's related to work. I'm very committed towards work, but I'm also very inclined towards finding healthier ways to commit to it.
You are totally right, Gabby. And like, I want to be able to set clear boundaries with work and find fulfillment in other parts of my life, like I see Gen Z doing. But I grew up thinking that the way to success is by climbing the ladder and being very dedicated. So it feels like it's connected. And for me, that duality, it's normal. So I always wonder why specifically work is viewed different for younger and older, proper Gen Z and millennials specifically.
Exactly. That's why today we're diving into the workplace dynamics between millennials and Gen Z. What makes these generations tick, and how do they work together? And are they really so different? Or can they create some awesome synergies when it comes to the future of work?
And in this episode, we'll be talking about the differences and the similarities between these two generations in the work environment. So stay tuned to find out how you can work better and understand your Gen Z and millennial colleagues.
So, to help us break this down, we've got two amazing and with no doubt millennial and Gen Z guests. First, meet Pedro Vega, a Gen Z journalist who's worked with the UN and various NGOs in the communications department. He is also part of the production team, I have to add. Pedro, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Gabby. Thank you, Jess. I'm so excited to be here, to be a part of the podcast, and to talk with Werner and the rest of you guys. Thank you so much for being here today. And joining Pedro, it's Verner Carew. He and is an experienced millennial project manager with background in strategy development, team management, and task management. Actually, it's the third time with us. So welcome back to the Hard Hub, Werner. We're so happy to have you here again.
Hey Jess, hey Gaby, hi Pedro. Thank you so much for having me here again. I'm really excited to be back.
Awesome. Awesome. We're very happy to have you here. Between you two, there's almost a 2 decade age gap, which means that your beginnings in the work field and the way you've approached work has to be very different, right? So, thank you for sharing this space with us, guys, and your unique perspectives. I know that it can be a little bit sensitive, the topic of
Yes.
age and really the differences that you know that set us apart. But really, this conversation of today is also to see those similarities. Like, how, are we really that different?
Yeah, so we can start today talking about communication. And we know that it's one of the most important aspects of our personal lives and work lives. So, and we always see online how millennials and just Gen Z approach communication in very different ways. For
Yeah.
instance, millennials are seen as email lovers, while Gen Z prefer quick chats or DMs. I kind of prefer this Gen Z
Yeah.
preference of communication, but there's got to be more to that, right?
Yeah, yeah, precisely. Like, I particularly can go either way, but then again, I'm right in the middle of both generations. But how do you think your style of communication impacts your workplace culture, and particularly in remote teams? Like for you and Pedro, you, Werner, and Pedro.
So when you mentioned that we millennials are email lovers, you are absolutely right. Actually, I adore email. The fact is that I love writing emails. I actually am a long email writer. I am
Yes.
very detailed when I send out emails. And now, Stella, you
I am
too.
too. I am too.
Yes, you are
I love
absolutely
it.
like I think we understand each other very well because our emails are so detailed. But here's the thing: I mean it's not a Gen Z or my or millennial thing. People do not like long emails. Like that's like a big no. People
Personality.
people
I like
people
writing
don't like
them,
them.
but
Yeah,
I don't like reading them. It
there
is
you
Absolutely,
true.
no,
go.
me neither.
There you go. But yeah, I mean, and it's not only email oriented. Like I use my inboxes for many things. Like even though I rely a lot
Mm.
on instant communication and other platforms, I still use my inbox a lot. Like I create notifications and then I rearrange my inbox and I go there. Like for me, it's something that just works that way. What about you, Pedro?
Me, on the other hand, I think I might speak on behalf of most of Gen Z. I prefer other platforms on the other hand. Like I believe email is a very useful tool for, like, for example, very precise instructions for tasks that should be like very detail oriented. However, I am more a fan of Slack or, for example, other platforms, particularly WhatsApp. Like, for example, I've treated with most of my Gen Z colleagues through WhatsApp, although it can get mixed through the personal messages and the work messages. And when you work through WhatsApp, it's a little bit difficult to set boundaries with your time and also with your personal life, with also your bosses. They might try to reach you when you're not in working hours. So yeah, I think that's one of the main problems or main issues that Gen Z workers have to deal with, because I must admit we are not great fans of emails.
Right. I think that the main difference is like the level of formality. Like for millennials, people that have been working for a longer time, it's like I'd rather have this very detailed here so that if I want to consult it, I have it. But then Gen Z is more like immediate. Like I'll give you like maybe a small pointer here through a DM, through Discord, through Slack, through whatever, instant messaging. And then if you have any questions, let's just get on a call and just work it out. So
Sure.
it's
Mm.
like the main difference in those kinds of communications. I am more inclined towards email because I can manage it better, honestly. But then maybe that's because of the fact that I've been using email since I was very little. Like I've had an email, and we have all had those questionable email accounts, weird
Oh my
names,
God, I still have
since we
one.
were
Yes.
little.
Mm,
Yes.
yeah.
I
So
don't
we've
have
been
them
using
anymore.
email for a long time. Discord is still new. Slack is still new. A lot of platforms are still too new for me, and that's where I identify more as a millennial. But definitely like the way that Gen Z communicates is more immediate. And then it's not like the same issue with formality. Like you can still do the work and even use slang and be informal, and as long as you do it, it's great. So it's definitely a different perspective.
And I also think that it depends on the purpose of the communication. For instance, if I'm writing something really important that has to be detail oriented, that has to be like A, B, C, or step one, step two, step three, you should, and it's of course for probably a lot of people, it should be directed in email. In email, probably if you're just communicating with that person because you need something immediately, then either Discord or Teams or WhatsApp, whatever platform works better to reach people easier and faster. I think that's the purpose of it. Guys, so we also wanted to, so there are like a lot of stereotypes and myths regarding how each generation communicates, right? And as well
Yes.
as different ways in which both generations can feel disconnected. So, what do you guys think that are the biggest misunderstanding between millennials and Gen Z when it comes to communication?
Mm, I believe one of the main misunderstandings may be like I think that not millennials but maybe other generations believe that Gen Zs are very informal, are very casual because of the use of emojis and that type of stuff. However, in my experience, I haven't had problems with millennials when I don't know sending messages with an emoji. I think it it gives like a human touch to the messages, you know, and you don't feel like a working machine all the time. You feel like a human being interacting with other human beings working
Mm-hmm.
in a same project. That's what I believe.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about you,
Yeah,
Werner?
I think, yeah, I agree. I don't I feel like millennials are sort of like that bridge between older generations, or yeah, older generations and Gen Z's, right? I personally, I tend to be very informal in my communication, even though I like, when I'm working, but I try to keep it light, right? Like I normally try to stray away from like this very structured approach, because again, I work the work environment in which I'm in. It's mostly people with an age gap with me. So if I'm managing a person, or if I'm working with designers or content writers or things like that, I am not going to get anywhere without, you know, deformalizing, or taking away that formal
Right.
part of the conversation.
Right.
However, I think so. Maybe I can adapt to that sort of communication style, and I will not have an issue. But then when you try to communicate between a Gen Z and a Gen X, or a Gen Z and a Boomer, then there's going to be an issue. For
Yeah.
example, what Pedro mentions about the emojis, it also depends on where you're working. Because when I was working in
Sure.
telecommunications and systems, I would have never seen an emoji in an email, and if I had seen it, I would be like, "What is this? Like, what's the deal here?" Then when I started working in marketing projects or creative projects, it became normal. Like, you use
Right.
emojis everywhere, so I was like, "Okay, it's fine," right? So yeah.
Yeah, I think it depends a lot, like in the environment you work with. Like, for example, I've worked in communications. I'm a journalist, so I think that since most of it is writing copies, creating content, it's sort of like more casual interactions with your colleagues. So in that case, for example, I've had great relationships with my millennial colleagues. Actually, I think I've had like only like 3 or 4 Gen Z colleagues. Most of my colleagues have always been millennials.
Yeah, so it's normal for us to be in the same age group. So that's when it becomes normal. So I have a question, a really small question for you guys. Have you ever had a moment of like where there is like a discommunication between different ages, like gap ages? For example, Pedro with someone that's
Or misinterpretations, maybe?
or
Like,
misinterpretations.
Um, I think I don't believe like misinterpretations as such, but maybe the type of humor that you use with different types of generations can lead to misinterpretations. For example, I remember working with a colleague of mine that is a millennial, and interacting and everything. I was creating content, so I showed her an animation that I made that was based on a meme, and my colleague didn't understand, so it led to what is this? And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, it's a meme. I had to give all the background and everything to explain why it was funny. So yeah, that type of stuff. But I don't think like anything that was like really serious. Like I
Yeah, it's
think there
like
may be certain misunderstandings.
things that you can relate are like memes. It's like when you show someone a meme and they don't understand, it's like, okay, you're probably not in my generation or just looking at the same content that I'm looking at. That could happen.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that even
absolutely.
applies to me. Like, like I say, I'm in that fine gap, and I still see like Gen Z memes now, and I don't understand them.
Yeah.
Honestly,
we have a very strange humor.
it's
Yeah.
too much for me.
Yeah. or Gen
Gen
Z
Z.
slang is also something I'm just
This
missing on words that
slang.
I'm like, wow,
What
something
does
is
this
happening
mean?
here. Yeah,
Let me
what is
Google
people talking
this
about?
first
Yeah,
before I.
exactly. I've been
Yeah.
doing that. Oh my god.
One thing, going back to like that main question, is like for me, and just considering that I'm right in the middle, for me, more is more. So I like to over communicate. I actually use emails for very lengthy kinds of communications, and then I just will use Discord or that immediate instant messaging to just let you know, like, hey, I sent this email, just check it out, or just like so you know it's about this, this, and this to specific people or to the people that are relevant to. So again, it's really a matter of like what's the best dynamic for your workplace and exactly who you work with. Because if you're mostly working with Gen Z, then maybe the instant messaging is the most effective way. But then if it's a combined culture at this point, like you find people from both generations, and like I feel like the most collaborative way is to meet in the middle. So for me, like being in that middle point, like both works, both work for me. Amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So another big conversation is around work ethic and motivation. Like we hear that millennials value work-life balance and purpose and finding purpose through work, while Gen Z is all about like financial security and flexibility through work, right? So I think that's also an important communication to conversation to cover. So what motivates you in your work and how do you think it differs between generations, Werner?
Yeah. I mean, in my case, again, I've been doing this for a while. As you mentioned, there's like almost a 2 decade gap. I started working, I think it was back on 2007 or something like this. I've been working for a while. So my motivation definitely shifted from when I started to where I'm starting right now. But as time progressed, I just realized that I need to be in a place where I feel like I'm making a difference, like my work
Right.
matters, right? So it's sort of a combination between being relevant in what I'm doing, also of course looking for that financial stability because we all work for that, and trying to respect my boundaries. You know, I know I tend to go sometimes overboard with workloads and things like that because I like to work, but then again, I always come to that point when I say, okay, I need to respect myself and I need to be kind to myself and stop here. So that would be basically how I see my approach to work.
Yeah, I agree with Berner a lot. Like, I think that millennials set the base for what Gen Z work culture is right now. For example, I think that before millennials, there wasn't a lot of flexibility in work schedules, workload,
Yeah.
and everything. So I think that millennials started, started the journey into flexibility, into also a little bit more of independence and giving value to the worker and separating work life from personal life. And now I believe that Gen Z values a lot this independence, this type of freedom as well, this flexibility. And well, nowadays we've had like a lot of different types of jobs opening up. For example, I started my career as a journalist. Nowadays, I've had to work in marketing, in different types of areas, of, for example, audiovisual production, and I've had few jobs where I've actually had to be a journalist. So there have been many job opportunities. For example, the appearance of remote jobs as well. So I believe
Yeah.
that nowadays, my generation, since they value this type of freedom, the remote jobs start to be like very appealing for them, or for us in general.
Yeah.
For example, that's what I love about remote job.
You know what I appreciate is that Gen Z has a little bit more of backbone when it comes to like boundaries. Like for historical reasons, like we've always and previous generations have accepted that work and that the employer has
Mm.
most of the power or a lot of the power to
Hmm.
decide how the dynamic is going to be, how the conditions are going to be. And we've grown up like really seeing that as a reality. And then one day, or we're seeing nowadays that Gen Zs are more willing to say like, no, this is not fair. This is not sustainable. This cannot keep going on like this. And then they've created a whole conversation towards flexibility, towards like really my own interests as a worker, and really putting into perspective the fact that if we want to maintain a sustainable work relationship, it has to
And that's
work both
because
ends.
Yeah,
We
It
go to
has to work for
absolutely.
therapy,
both of us.
probably.
Oh, we we
Probably it
go
has
to
to a lot
we
to do
go
with,
to
again,
therapy also.
boundaries.
Trust me.
Knowing
You
how
you
to
normalize
establish
therapy.
boundaries.
No,
That's
we
that is a good
normalize
thing.
therapy.
That's an important point, like normalizing therapy. Because again, like still like till maybe like 20, 15 years ago, I'm rewatching Friends and they talk about therapy like
For
it
like
was like if it were
boomers.
like
Uh-huh.
something terrible, and we're talking about the 2000s, early 2000s. So it's
Yeah.
normalizing therapy is something relatively recent, and then exactly
Yeah.
putting those emotional boundaries, being able to say no, even if it's like not for the best at many cases. It's actually creating a perspective, like a whole new wave of employers having to reevaluate how they can create more sustainable work structures for their employees.
Yeah, I think it's even harder for much older generations to come into a middle point, like understanding this. Like, for an instance, millennials and Gen Zs, we are more into, yes, let's go to therapy. Yes, let's talk it out. Yes, let's work it out together. But for older generations could be a little bit harder, but we understand.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
and
understand that it's,
and even
yeah.
that breaking the wheel, like again, for people that have been working under a specific dynamic for so long, it's going to be a tougher conversation to have to say, like, hey, how about we change this? They're going to be like, why? I've
Well,
accepted
Yeah.
this all
hmm
my life. Why
Exactly.
should I change it now?
Yeah.
Even if it's
yeah.
for the better, if it's for the best, like they're still going to be like, no, like people are reluctant to change, and that's natural also.
I think there's even a difference in how we react and set boundaries because Gen Zs tend to be very upfront on their boundaries. It's like, hey, I'm not doing this. It's not good for me. While my millennials, we tend to like laugh it off. It's like,
Dabble.
ah, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just
Mhm.
going to do it, but funny. It's
I
like,
don't
and
want
it's not funny. Like we
Yeah.
should just flat out
It's
say
true. It's
no.
true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go.
Or probably we look for a kinder way of saying things, probably, or a way that it's not gonna probably hurt somebody else's feelings when you say no. But if you say no, that's gonna, if you don't accept that no and you still do it, the person that's going to be hurt or kind of like upset about something, it's going to be us
Yeah,
if we don't set those boundaries.
Yeah.
exactly.
So yeah, in most jobs, if not in all, cooperation between different people with different backgrounds creates a successful work environment. So what do you think, guys, about like how do millennials and Gen Z collaborate when it comes to managing work-life balance and flexibility?
Well, I believe that when it comes to managing the work-life balance, yes, we Gen Z value a lot the flexibility. For example, I think it's because millennials have set, like I said before, they have set the bar over here. So now Gen Z can flow more freely through the work. For example, I haven't had a job where I haven't had flexibility. I think I've been very lucky in that sense, where I've had amazing bosses, millennial bosses actually, that have showed me the way, that have allowed me flexibility. And I think that's because when, for example, the work environment when millennials started wasn't as flexible as it is for us
Yeah.
now. For example, now I've started, for example, I've started working since 2020. That was my first job. And since then, I've always had this flexibility that was given by my bosses. So I believe I've been very lucky, but most of all, it's been thanks to all the, well, all the complaints and all the work that has changed due to the millennials.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point. Like you see a lot of like these memes about millennial bosses, and they're always like, "Oh, did she really tell you that? Ah, don't mind, we'll take care of that. Oh, you want to take a day off? Yeah, go ahead. You don't need to pass it through the form. Just tell me." And that's very much the style how I interact with Gen Z people teammates, right? And I think it definitely comes from the fact that we went through that change or that shift in mentality like definitely
Right.
when I started working
Hmm.
a lot of years back, like the idea of working remotely was out of the table. You had to get in the office 7 a.m. and leave whenever you were done, and just thinking I'm gonna work for home from home was just a completely crazy idea. So we really have had to push for those changes. So we understand and we try to protect them as much as possible.
Yeah, and it's been great. For example, now I've seen jobs where I don't believe that there are much, well, there are many jobs that are not hybrid. For example, most presential works or presential jobs are even hybrid. For example, they give you 2 days a week where you can work from home. They can give you even up to three, or it depends on the flexibility. And I think it's because they are adapting to this mentality of the Gen Z worker. That's the future of work.
And again, like we're talking a lot about Gen Z learning from millennials, but then again, I see a lot of learning from millennials towards like we're learning a lot from Gen Z. Like I
Yeah.
admire and I hate at the same time the fact that a Gen Z can really just say no so easily. When I still have like this millennial mindset, like well, I have to justify my answer, and even if I'm in the right, I have to say exactly in detail why I'm saying no to this condition, and Gen Z is like, nope, not
Nope.
taking it. Like they're not scared of confrontation, and confrontation doesn't need to be unethical, or it doesn't need to be like negative. Like a confrontation really creates the space to have a discussion and a a proper conversation on what is right and what should change. So
Hmm.
I've learned that from working with younger people, and I find it very like it's like a breath of fresh air because like we've struggled for so long with these aspects. Like I've been working since 2017, 2016, and like I've started to establish healthier boundaries at my workplace maybe like 2 years ago, and starting to say no just because it doesn't make sense. But then
Hmm.
again, like it was a struggle, and but seeing that example from younger people that are like willing to say no, even if there are like retaliations, or even if there are consequences, if I'm gonna be like if I'm gonna be thrown out of my job just because I say no to a healthy boundary, then that's not the place for me to be. I love that mentality of people.
Hmm.
That people are more like, you know what? No. And I've
Yeah.
learned that
Yeah.
through working with younger people.
Yeah, I think Gen Z, for example, I've seen this more in my brothers than in myself, but I think that for Gen Z, hierarchy is not a thing. Like everyone is equal, they speak to everyone the same way, and this can be a little bit, for example, is a little bit shocking for me sometimes, I must admit.
Yeah.
But for example, in the work environment, I've seen Gen Z coworkers set healthy boundaries in time with their bosses. And I think it's because of this hierarchy melting stuff.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Also knowing when to respect, right? Because there are
Absolutely,
things
yeah.
that are like go way beyond to the other part where it's like, hey, you're not my bro. You are working with me and for me, and let's set those boundaries clear. So I think it's also kind of like a balance, or where you get to know your boss, but at the same time you show the person respect and the honor that you should be with him, because you are learning from him too, you know? So
Yeah.
yeah, I think
But
that's
even
really
but even
important to
that,
know.
I would say like you can have a casual conversation with your boss, and now it doesn't need to be interpreted as lack of professionalism or a lack of respect or anything. Like
Yes.
that will not change the seriousness I give to my job and the deliverables and my commitment to this work. But then again, let's just have a more casual conversation about this
Hmm.
instead of like
More
continuing these
formal.
patterns that a lot of times roadblock effective communication.
Yeah, it's becoming
Yeah.
that casual communication. It's becoming the norm and not the exception. Because I do remember back in the day, like I can say 15 years ago, I had a boss, which to me was an amazing mentor, and I wouldn't say friend because he wasn't my friend, but he was very casual. Like we would have conversations, and we didn't have to go through the whole formality of things like that. It was just a casual conversation. It was respectful, of course, but it was very casual. So, but again, that was the exception back then. Now
Hmm.
it's
Right.
the norm. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Wow.
believe it's the norm as
Amazing.
well.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean there's so much topics, so many topics that we can take from this millennial versus Gen Z perspective, but unfortunately, we've reached the end of today's episode. Werner and Pedro, thank you for sharing your views as millennials and Gen Z. I'm sorry if I've called anyone too young or too
Too
experienced at
old.
some points. But then that's the topic of the day. So, even though we talked about many differences, I do think that there are still many similarities we can learn from. And I definitely think it's a big plus to find workplaces where you have different generations collaborating because there's so much to learn from each other. Together, these generations have reshaped the workplace how we know it nowadays.
Yeah, that's right. And whether it's communication styles or what motivates them, both generations bring something really valuable to the table. I feel nowadays the key is to understand and embrace those differences. And when we do, that's where the real collaboration happens and we can actually improve and just work and improve our work and our workspace.
Yeah. So, Pedro and Werner, thank you so much for sharing your insights today.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Gabby.
guys. It was a pleasure being with
Well,
you.
and also to our listeners, just make sure to subscribe and share this episode if you enjoyed it. There's a lot more to come on the Hire Hub. And until next time, I'm Jess.
Gabby, thank you for joining us. That wraps another episode of the Hired Hub podcast. We hope you found today's discussion empowering and insightful. Remember, success in the world of remote work is within your reach, and we're here to support you every step of the way.
Be sure to subscribe to our podcast for more expert advice and engaging conversations. Please give us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify to help us reach more people who can benefit from the Hired Hub podcast.